Our life is in your hands, Chosen One. Prove yourself. Find the Gek. Be ourselves.
So, with the re-emergence of the Fallout universe in cultural favor through the lauded TV series, Todd Howard teasing Fallout 5 as Bethesda's next big project after The Elder Scrolls 6. Please, Todd, please send it elsewhere. Don't make it about High Rock, please. And the recent 2024 update to Fallout 4. Ignore the tears of the broken modding scene. Now is as good a time as ever to dive into the backlog of the Fallout series. Obviously, Fallout New Vegas is a great game with tons of replayability as well as accessibility, even for newer players, and Fallout 3 is a game, a 3D game even, but before the salvation of 3D graphics, 2.5D isometrics were king, and in the Fallout universe, 3 games laid the groundwork for the amazingly buggy Fallout universe we also adore. Those 3 being Fallout, Fallout 2, and Fallout Tactics. In short, Fallout 2 is a post-apocalyptic turn-based-ish CRPG developed by Black Isle Studios and released in 1998 as the follow-up to Fallout or Fallout 1. Gameplay is enhanced, narrative and story is strengthened, and quality of life is more present than ever. I'm not going to launch into a play-by-play deep dive into the story of Fallout 2 or the lore of the Fallout setting at large, but rather attempt an impassioned plea, completely willingly, to give Fallout 2 another crack, despite the rather unwelcome UI, retro difficulty scale, and endless amount of clicking on pixel-perfect ladders. You are the chosen one, trained, groomed, and finally sent into the expansive world of Fallout 2 to find the mysterious Gek, a supposed holy device passed down in stories by pot-smoking elders in your tribe through generations, foretold to rebuild your tribe into a fertile home once again. You create your own character from a truly wide mix of looks, traits, skills, and statistics, achieving experience points and levels through both violent and non-violent solutions. On your journey for the great ayahuasca fertilizer, you will kill irradiated wildlife, seduce jet-addled bogmen, and recruit various companions of varying degrees of usefulness. Listen, if your Fallout gaming experience is Fallout 3 and onwards, the chasm of gameplay between Fallout 2 and the newer games will be stark. In fact, of newer popular games, Baldur's Gate 3 enjoyers and Pillars of Eternity scholars will find themselves much more at home in the slower-paced, harsh Fallout 1 and 2. However, if you are a fan of New Vegas and a fan of the writing, dialogue, and atmosphere in particular, please give this ancient old title a chance to win you over. For instance, are you missing freedom in your modern gaming experience? Are you longing for the autonomy to die to an ant in the unskippable tutorial zone? Or maybe you want to mix it up and perhaps perish to a rat in the first town you see? Well, Fallout has got all that and more. But on a serious note, the first couple of hours in Fallout 2, especially for completely new players, are going to predominantly suck as far as combat goes. Depending on how you create your first character, what difficulty you play on, your very first combat encounter can be a very frustrating one. The key here is exploration, and I don't mean exploring every square centimeter of wasteland dirt, but exploring the various areas that you travel to throughout the course of your game. Don't leave any house or bone pile unrummaged, nor any named NPC unaccosted. Exploration nets you immutable Second Amendment rights, life-saving drugs, and most importantly, dialogue.
Oh, lovely. They've sent me a moron!
Also, kill flick. The writing is really what inspired all this yapping, and it's the primary reason why I choose to highlight Fallout 2 ahead of Fallout 1, even though Fallout 2 in many ways assumes that the player has played its predecessor. What the game lacks in quality of life or modern mainstay elements such as advanced graphics or comprehensive voice acting, it more than makes up for in its stellar writing. Want to seduce, lie, and sneak your way through the game? Go high speech and make money the 21st century way. From the very first named bald guy in your way to the very last boss of the game in Fallout 2, you never have to take the shot yourself. Maybe you want the complete opposite, to play as a low intelligence barbarian with a pointy stick, make intelligence your dump stat, and experience Fallout in a way modern games just won't provide. I will say though, most modern players, their minds addled by endless streams of dopamine, G-Fuel, and well-spoken industry leaders, will find a pacifist run where you gently kiss the overgrown iguanas goodbye with your tail between your legs and don't get to dome Flick first thing upon arriving in the den for his sweet loot. Fairly boring. Not convinced by vague promises of interesting writing and characters? Here are a handful of my favorite scenarios and encounters from Fallout 2. Tor, the low IQ farmer, becoming an absolute scholar if you have below 4 intelligence yourself. Sleeping with Miria and immediately being wedded with her. Encountering Big armored guy in the wasteland and being introduced to his villain, and many more. Now, I would be lying if I concluded that Fallout 2 is an unblemished masterpiece that will single-handedly rewire your brain synapses. As mentioned earlier, the start of the game can be rough depending on your stats and skills, and without guides you can feel quite lost, being unable to fend off even the smallest of geckos without taking an immediate 72-hour nap in between fisticuffs. But even as you become very acquainted with the aimed shot at delicious eyeball strategy, you will probably find Fallout 2's combat to be a little boring and bland by the end game. Especially if you've become sumo-brained like myself, you may find the endless clicking on various world objects, hot elements, and soon-to-be dead slavers a little too slow-paced without the increased depth of tactical challenge present in modern turn-based games like Baldur's Gate 3 or War Tales, or even contemporary titles such as the original Baldur's Gate or Heroes of Might and Magic 3 with their multitude of spells and abilities to choose from. The only two flavors of enemies you really ever meet are either gun or baseball bats, and the solution is usually whatever flavor you prefer between expedited critical ocular exam versus sharing the good word of the 5mm god. Now, I will reiterate that the strength of Fallout 2 and 1 for that matter is not the combat itself, but what happens before and after combat. The choices that led you to absolutely braining some gormless wastelander, and the following rewards, consequences, and potential narrative development. The atmosphere of Fallout New Vegas is so evocative for Fallout 2. Both games present an absolutely brutal world with heinous characters and choices. Cook, the Legion, or serving up one of your delectable companions as a culinary delight for the White Gloves.
That's what I got given at the fucking shit!
And in Fallout 2, the Enclave are brutal, Walled City is appalling, and you yourself can become a most infamous slaver through Metzger. At every turn in both of these games, you are presented with something depraved, something appalling, but also the opportunity to counterweight this through noble actions, which often does require the invaluable assistance of your P90. Presenting a setting with themes as dark as Fallout 2 and New Vegas is difficult enough without becoming too obscene, or not doing enough and becoming too toothless. See Skyrim, aka the most boring civil war ever depicted. But on top of that, both Fallout 2 and New Vegas feature a healthy sprinkling of humor as well. In New Vegas, you have a neo-pagan imperialistic dictator leading a merciless slave army dressed in football pads and sports gear on a swath of death and enslavement across the southwestern United States. And you have a side quest fetching a robot with a propensity for drill-operated butthole activities. And it works. It sounds crazy, but it works. Both Caesar and Fisto can exist in the same setting, and not only does it work, them existing together in the same playthrough, in the same universe, elevates your experience. They coalesce into a higher unity of writing and atmosphere that, with no disrespect to any of these titles, surpass the game world of Baldur's Gate 3 or Dark Souls or Dragon Age, which overall are games that I might even prefer to Fallout New Vegas. And Fallout 2 has this in spades. There is no doubt of the inspiration that New Vegas has drawn from Fallout 2, and if you are a fan of game worlds marrying the dark and unsettling with the humorous and offbeat, such as the Witcher series for instance, I genuinely believe that the combat system headache from the first couple of hours of trial and error, save and reload, hit and literal miss are well worth it. And by the way, let us not allow the discourse about bad combat to completely run roughshod over us. It's fine, it works. I'd even go as far as saying that early to mid-game gun combat is quite enjoyable in conjunction with the economy of the game. You have too few stim packs, too few 44 rounds. Is Sulik going to goddamn critically miss and deposit his gun on the ground again? Finally, why Fallout 2 instead of 1? Outside of my strong personal bias, the biggest argument for starting with Fallout 1, outside of respecting the numbers obviously, is Fallout 1 having a much gentler introduction to combat and a much easier difficulty scaling. A lot of the headaches that new players who start in Fallout 2 encounter are probably due to the developers assuming you've played Fallout 1 and are completely assured with the combat system, the skills, the action points, and so on and so on. Now, I will counter that reason with an objective amount of quality of life updates. You have no idea how much happiness these two words bring. And primarily, most people, deservingly so, rate New Vegas as the best Fallout game ever, with the outstanding writing doing the heaviest of lifting. Fallout 2 is, in my mind, the direct predecessor to New Vegas. Not Fallout 3, despite the shared engine, but Fallout 2. If you enjoy the dark, cynical atmosphere mixed with borderline wacky humor of New Vegas, you will enjoy the writing in Fallout 2, and much more so than Fallout 1. Listen here now, I can't promise that you'll enjoy Fallout 2, but it's such a minor commitment that you ought to give it a shot. It's so cheap on GOG, every PC, laptop and refrigerator in the world can run it, and if you're not gelling with the game by the time you finished it, then at least you gave a piece of gaming history a worthwhile shot. So, that was a video. If you've made it this far, first of all, thank you very much for watching this exercise in meme snatching and copy pasting. Like, subscribe, Patreon, and support down in the description. Yada yada yada. Of course, watch my other videos of similar quality. Anyway, this last part is going to be a mostly unedited yap session, just going over a few closing thoughts in the video. The background video is from my actual playthrough replay of Fallout 2, and I am playing with 3 mods, those being the Restoration Project, the Companion Expansion, and S-Fall, which is a base requirement of the former 2. I do believe that I only spoke about things present in vanilla Fallout 2, but if I included some quality of life from S-Fall, sue me. However, I will recommend installing the Restoration Project mod and of course S-Fall, even if it is your first playthrough. Usually mods on a first playthrough are not my jam, but the Restoration Project is seamless and stable and includes only content that was cut from the original Fallout 2, and S-Fall, which is required, adds even more quality of life and some bug fixes, so highly recommended. As for the companion expansions, you know, it has some bugs and errors, and I definitely wouldn't recommend it for your first playthrough, but it is a fine option, I guess. Maybe for multiple playthroughs, despite the occasional missing dialogue error. This is a comedy video essay, and I do use the word comedy very loosely here, and the word essay now that I think about it. But I do feel very strongly about Fallout 2 as a contender for the best Fallout game ever. Although, as soon as I finally replay New Vegas, I'll probably end up rating that S tier anyway. Now, just a few final thoughts on builds. If you are a true scholarly type who doesn't want any sort of guides or tutorials, stop the video now, check out my other stuff, and thanks for watching. Now, usually builds and stats for single player games vary from purely role-playing gimmicks to meta building, straight demigods, steamrolling whatever children's role-playing game you just became hyper-fixated on, and to modern gaming's credit or discredit depending on your point of view. They will usually accommodate any amount of dumbassery in your builds, if not through milquetoast gameplay, then at least through a difficulty slider, right? Fallout 2, not so much. Kinda. There is a difficulty slider, but if you are dead set on just raw dogging the game, no guides or tutorials, throwing points into whatever you feel like, you could end up having a pretty lousy experience if you haven't played these sorts of games that much. Obviously, specifically having played Fallout 1 first would give you insight into the different stats and skills in a much easier game. Fallout 1 is not an easy game, but it's surely an easier game than Fallout 2, whereas Fallout 2 really punishes you early game if you go in blind, even on easy difficulty. You can quite easily end up in combat having yet to find a firearm or having such bad combat skill allocation that it doesn't really matter. I'll put forward one build. It's not necessarily the most metagame easy mode build, nor is it in any way, shape or form a required build to progress in the game. Just in my opinion, a nice broad build that should let you experience a lot of dialogue in the game while keeping your options open for companions and different types of firearms you intend to use or you want to use. I won't discuss every single trait or attribute or skill point, since I'm not a Fallout 2 expert at all, just a humble enjoyer. So this is the build sheet I showed during the main part of the video. First of all, Kino. Secondly, optional traits is where you'll start allocating. Gifted is almost so good that it's kind of cheating to grab. I would take this trait no matter what your plans are. Now, the second trait you can play around with. I would recommend small frame. Basically, any build you would end up in could use it. I recommend that your build is centered around firearms and having companions, and these attribute allocations will facilitate that nicely. Now, I write getting to 8 perception for the sniper perk at level 24. You can easily on your first run finish the game without getting to level 24, but perception is good for ranged either way. My point is, maybe you've read about the sniper perk, or if you've seen it and you think, wow, that's powerful, I'm going to center my build around it. It's available at level 24. That's like 80-90% of the game before you get to level 24, so I wouldn't center my build around that specifically. It's something you are going to get at the very last part of the game. Now, for skills, I like tagging small weapons and speech. Tagging doubles the rate the skill increases when you pour points from leveling into it. Getting around 100 speech and small weapons early game is pretty cool, and I recommend it. Third tag is negotiable. I like lockpick personally, but science or traps is they can work just as well. What's good to know is that most non-combat skills do not need to be leveled beyond 100, so by the mid-game you'll pretty much be swimming in extra skill points. Finally, for charisma, every 2 skill points unlocks an additional companion slot. I would probably personally go 6 charisma instead and 7 luck, since luck isn't all that important in the early game. Having companions is not always good, mind you. Friendly fire is based on chance and proximity, and if you're one of the burst boys, having a melee companion does run the significant risk of putting a full magazine into the back of your favorite native Klamath tribesman. That being said, this is just a video game, and it's not even that hard. Just frustrating early on. It's not that serious. If you're the type of player who prefers stumbling about, finding your own way, You can absolutely do it in Fallout 2. Exploring starting areas is really the name of the game. It's not that difficult. Going in blind is not the equivalent to having your Candy Crush playing aunt start a game of Dark Souls choosing deprived because you told her it would unlock the secret pickle mechanic. Alright, that's all for now. Check the descriptions for links to Patreon and other ways of supporting me. Bye bye.